Woo-hoo-hoo. And we're back on another Tuesday for a LinkedIn Live with Jillian, and I have a fabulous guest in the house today. Somebody I just met for the first time, but I felt I already knowed her, which knowed her. Knew her. The power of LinkedIn. I wonder if I can ever do these right. The power of LinkedIn, getting to know people before you get to know people, get to meet people. So anyways, Nola, we have a fabulous topic today. We are talking about storytelling to shine your light on LinkedIn. I love that title. It's magical. So can you please, for anybody who doesn't know you, just give a brief little who you are and what you do, and we'll get stuck in.
Okay, of course. Yes, we had a lovely chat, so that was fun. Thank you. So I'm Nola Simon. I'm a hybrid. Here's my mouth going. I can't do it either. I'm a hybrid remote work consultant, CEO of Nola Simon Advisory, and I literally just finished a sabbatical, and now I'm launching a business in order to help people and companies do hybrid remote work better, because I think that I have 10 years experience, and that's the best value I can bring to the world right now.
Awesome. Awesome. I love it. I love it. And it was very interesting. You had put something in the comments and I wasn't familiar with the term. So I think it would be really good to maybe like start with that, because I like to always get the terminology, figured out right away, so we make sure that we're discussing things correctly. So you used a phrase, hybrid hindsight. Was that the correct phrase?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. It was
So
funny.
define that. What does that mean? Because I was just like, okay, I didn't think I understood it correctly. So explain.
So I actually attended a live stream last week, and I had a couple of different authors on it, and one of them was Dory Clark, and they're all about reinvention, and they were talking about stories about how to reinvent yourself. And one of the terms that came up was this hybrid hindsight, and it's you're on a path for reinvention. And it's really, you've been on that path for a while, but you don't realize that you've been building the steps for it. It's only on hindsight that you realize that you've actually got a story that spans a significant period of time. And so that's actually something that I considered while I was on sabbatical. I started working from home in 2012, right? Because I had little kids, I had a really long commute. I lived north of Toronto. And even though I never moved, my commute changed from like 45 minutes to 2 hours, right? And so I started pushing for work from home because it meant that I was never seeing my kids. And
Right.
so for 10 years, well before the pandemic, I've worked every kind of different version of hybrid or remote, anywhere from like 1 day a week to 4 days a week. I switched jobs after a car accident, and I worked 100% remote, and I had to travel for work as well too. So I've had all kinds of different experiences, different ways of working that really have value. And a lot of people, I didn't actually realize, but a lot of people hadn't worked fully remotely until the pandemic as well. Like once you've been doing it for a while, you accept it as normal, right? I remember when the pandemic first started, my cousin had actually said that her husband had never once ever worked from home, ever. No concept of how to do it. And so that's where I realized that I'd been building that path for 10 years, but not really focusing on it because it wasn't my job title. It wasn't my responsibility. It was just something that I was pursuing to really improve my well-being, my relationship with my family, just being around when my mom was sick and needed extra caregiving while, she was sick with dementia. And really, when I reframe my story, I've got 10 years of experience in the work that I'm doing right now. Except if you looked at my resume, you wouldn't see that story. I had to really rejig how I told that. And that hybrid hindsight term, I just learned last week. So
That's cool.
terminology is really changing.
I love it.
And it
I love
really
it.
impacts how you tell the stories.
I love it. So let's go one more. Storytelling. That can mean so many different things. It could just be like Well, let me tell you about the time I went to adopt my dog, and there's a story there, but it can also talk about like your hero journey story of like, okay, before I used to be nervous about being in front of the camera, so I stayed behind the camera, but then I pushed through some barriers and now I'm able to do talking head videos. That's the story. Storytelling can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So,
Yeah.
what does storytelling mean to you?
Storytelling really is a way of engagement. I mean, honestly, I've always been a reader. I've always been interested in
Mhm.
stories. When I was a kid, my mom used to watch all kinds of soap operas. So, like, I had a crash course in storytelling because she used to watch soap operas starting like 11:30 in the morning until like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And so my husband actually hates it because I can literally tell him what the plot is going to be of any like rom com movie like 5 minutes in. And he's always so mad because I'm always right. But it's like years worth of knowing how those stories are told. So you mentioned hero's journey is the
Yes,
type of
I love
story
that.
that frequently is told. If you look at Star Wars, if you look at Harry
Yep.
Potter, those are
Wizard of
hero
Oz.
journeys. Wizard of Oz, yeah, like it's one of the classic tales. But storytelling goes much further than that, right? Because in terms of history, that's really what history was, right? Like
Mhm.
anytime there was a war, the winner of the war told the story. Well, is that
Yep.
the truth? One of the most impactful books I ever read. I took a history course, and one of the most impactful books I ever read was um, historical thinking, something like that. And it was all about critical thinking about the way that history is told through story, right? Because
Ooh.
you think back, before people could read or write, like that's how they communicated, social norms, fairy
Yep.
tales, all of that. And so it's
Like
really
Homer's
relevant.
Odyssey. That was
Exactly.
that's one where people would recite it. They
Right.
remembered it before it was even printed, so it was amazing.
Exactly. And it's that oral tradition, right? So
Mm.
story is a way that humans have always really communicated. And so what's happening now with like LinkedIn, and you see it in Instagram and in different ways as well too. It's one of the ways that we catch people's attention because there's so
Mhm.
much data coming at everybody. If you can actually tell a compelling story that catches people's interest and they can relate to it, then you can deliver the message. So you have to be careful
Love
with
it.
storytelling because, story can be manipulated, right? So it's
Mm.
always good to assess the agenda of whoever's telling that story. And that's where it's really important to be consistent and authentic. So my version of authenticity isn't necessarily just showing up on camera and being who you are in that particular moment. It's who are you on camera? What are you writing? What are you commenting? How are you interacting with people? If you actually go to Twitter or you go to Instagram, like, am I seeing the same person there? Is it
Ooh,
an
good point.
authentic story that's really representing you across the board? And that's where this whole personal brand comes in, is just, it's a story, right?
Mm.
But sometimes the inaction that you take is a story as well too, right? So these people who come out, you see them a lot, and they're like, I love people, I love engaging, I love interacting, and then they never respond to any comment on any
Mm.
platform.
Mm.
What are they doing? So
They're
I'm
telling a
constantly
different
assessing.
story.
Exactly,
There's a
that's right.
mismatch.
That's right. Yeah. And you see it in different contexts as well too. I remember the company I worked for. They brought in this author. He was fun. He was interesting. He did a great presentation, but his whole persona was just like, I'm really this amazing person. Engage with me. Like, contact me. And I did. And I had like that connection. Like, he wouldn't accept my request. He didn't respond to anything I said.
Mm. Mm.
And it's just like, yeah, I'm not going to buy your book because
No.
I don't buy your story. I think you're a persona.
Wow. Wow.
So,
That's powerful. That's very powerful, because you're right. It's like I've even seen, like, people on LinkedIn Lives, and, somebody was talking about this, and it's blanking out who was talking about this the other day, but literally they talked about you can see LinkedIn Lives, and the people talking are like, "Reach out, connect with me, and this and that," and then people do, and they don't
yeah.
connect with them. So it's like, don't say one thing for the camera if it's not true,
Yeah.
then just say, sorry, follow me, you know, like just be honest. I think we expect people to be honest in how you show up. So don't
Yeah.
have this is the face I show, but I'm really like this. So,
Yeah.
you know, be like you said, be authentic in every part of what you do. Boy, that's really, really powerful. So
Yeah.
speaking of storytelling and shining your light on LinkedIn, you had some amazing things happen for you in the last little bit with the media picking up on your story. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because that's fascinating.
Yeah, so it's actually something that's been happening. I didn't actually expect to have media involvement when I launched my business. I couldn't have picked better timing for it. But what's happened is because I got really specific, I've worked for the coach, Carrie Twigg, for well over a year now, and she actually called me out. She's like, "You're a cheerleader." She's like, you talk about storytelling, but you're not really telling your own story." And so she called me out, and she made me get more
Mhm.
specific and really focus in on what it was I wanted to deliver, like be very specific in terms of what the business was going to be, how I help, what value I bring, very specific and focusing, right? Because I have a wide variety of interests. So it's like, okay, that's great to have a wide variety of interests, but how is
Mhm.
that serving you? Right.
Got it.
And so I got really specific. I stopped, doing birthday messages. It's not that birthday messages are a bad thing, but it just didn't help me tell a story. Right. So, and I did that everywhere. And Twitter in particular, I got very blunt and very vocal in terms of opinion about return to office, hybrid work, remote work, what the value is, what the detriment could be. Um, I have a real thing about the people who tell the story that if you work from home or you work remotely and you're never in the office, you're never going to get promoted because,
Mm.
hi, have you heard of LinkedIn? There's a way to be very visible. And I once actually had a global CEO search me out in a conference, make me take a picture with him, and I ended up in the middle of all of the company's social media around the globe, right?
Wow.
Well,
Wow.
that story, I have some very distinct opinions on how employee advocacy can really improve your chances of actually getting promoted. And so I started telling those types of story, and that's where the media, particularly on Twitter, really picked up on that. And so I had a whole run earlier in the year where I had 4 interviews with the Toronto Star. I'm based in Canada, so I'm getting a lot the attention of Canadian media. I was interviewed by CTV, which actually ended up being a printed article as well too. And then I had a whole run of CBC, and they actually put me on syndication for radio stations. And so I did 6 interviews last week. It's actually really fascinated. From Victoria, I think the furthest east was Cape Breton. So
Wow.
um,
That's truly coast to coast,
it was
coast to
truly
coast.
coast to coast. Yeah, and it
Man.
was
And
quite
and just
entertaining. It was
just
5 minutes apart.
for the non-Canadians in the audience, CTV is the Canadian Television Network, I guess, and then
Yeah.
CBC is the Canadian Broadcast Corporation.
Exactly, that's right. Yeah, exactly. So it's sort of like equivalent to like ABC and CNN, like, those national type
National.
uh, networks. And so it's kind of cool, right? So, but the CBC, I actually had an interview where I actually had a printed article too for CBC. They actually picked up my story. He started his article telling my story because 6 weeks after I started piloting work from home back in 2012, I broke my foot. And that's how I ended up being the only person in the whole
Mm,
division working from home 5 days a week. So, like,
mm.
I basically created it just because it wasn't safe for me to drive. And I managed to convince them that, there was nothing wrong with my brain or my mouth. And so let me work from home. I can push through this. And, that's how I kind of became the expert on all things work from home at that particular point.
Cool.
Yeah. And he
So
started the story, that
yes,
article with my story, which is cool.
that so in essence, then, would you suggest to people that sometimes we do have to share some personal stuff in our life to make us distinct? Like, you talk about breaking your foot. It's like, is that's a personal detail that people might say, "Oh, I don't know if I should be talking about, those personal things, but it's those stories that get remembered that are human. Otherwise, if you just talk about it from a very, removed part of just talking about, oh, I believe in remote, working from home and blah, blah, blah. There's no personality coming into it. So how you're speaking versus this person versus this person. So sometimes I
Yeah.
think you have to bring in that personal element, correct?
So that's what I do. I mean, I'm very comfortable with that. Now, not everybody is going to be comfortable doing that. I think the key thing is really having something specific to say. So I believe in the personal aspect, but I do know some people who, they've been through some things in their life and they're not willing to share certain pieces of it. So they could have a distinct opinion and be comfortable sharing parts of it, but not everything, right?
Got it.
So I think that that's a very personal decision that you have to make. But I do think having something specific that's relatable and at like a concrete opinion, that's the way that you're going to stand out, because that's what's going to capture the attention. That people are going to relate to it. They're going to pick up the story. And then it's like they sort of get invested in how that's going to go.
Right, right. That's fabulous. That's fabulous. Well, can we pop over and just see if we have any? We do. We have lots of people standing
Oh,
by. So
cool.
we've got Jeff Young in the house, tuning
Okay.
in to see Jillian and Nola get the rest of the story. Paul Harvey. I grew up on Paul Harvey. So did Jeff. It's like just, and the rest of the story. So it's true. Stories, they just absolutely engage us. We have Niraj, Jillian, and Nola. Greetings from Ireland. Fabulous to see you both. Can't wait to hear what you have to say. I'm so glad you joined us today, Niraj. That's awesome. That's awesome. Diana, coming to us from YouTube. Hello, ladies. Happy to catch you live. So wonderful, wonderful. I love that we pull in people from all different places. We've got Rebecca Wilson, who loves a good story because she's always got her business book bites. I love it. Hello and good evening from Scotland. Always enjoy LinkedIn Lives with Jillian and her lovely guests. And I hope you guys are connected and know each other because you guys are good. And here we have another storyteller. I don't know if you know Catherine Ledger. She is
I don't think
beautiful storyteller, beautiful storyteller. Good to see you both. Love the subject and look forward so much to this discussion. Thank you, Catherine. I'm so glad you joined us. Let's see, brilliant topic and so looking forward to this. I think I could mess up your name, so I'm not going to try saying it. But thank you for joining us today. We have Jeff again. Besides yourself, Nola, who do you consider one of your favorite storytellers? Oh, that's a good question.
So I mean, on LinkedIn, Carrie Twigg honestly is my favorite writer. Her writing honestly is the reason that I hired her as my coach, and she's actually pivoting now. So she's actually retelling her story. She's been pivoting while we've been working together. So it's been a privilege to watch her in action and really taking her own advice. And a lot of the times it's the details that you don't share that can actually be magic, right? And how you edit your story to highlight different aspects of your skills, right, can be really interesting. So a lot of times it's, what can I take away? Like that editing process is really important in how you retell stories. So in terms of actual writers who tell stories. I mean, Diana Gabaldon wrote Outlander, so I'm a book fan. Yeah, I couldn't actually tell you not to read Outlander. So I haven't necessarily watched the whole TV show because I'm a book fan. My oldest daughter is actually, her middle name is actually Claire.
Oh,
She's
wow.
horrified that she was named after Outlander, but honestly, the character of Claire is like the whole hero of that story. And I know a lot of people love Jamie Fraser, and I love Jamie Fraser too, but Outlander
It's
is
her point
Claire's
of view.
story.
It's Claire's. It's always from, like, if you read the books versus, and I have to read a book before I see a movie or
Yeah.
I'm ruined,
Yeah.
and that's why I've never read Harry Potter. I hate to say it. I never read Harry Potter
Yeah.
because I had kids and we saw the movies first, and I can't go back and read a book. Once I've seen the movie, I'm absolutely ruined. But with the Outlander series, if you read the books, you see the point of view is always Claire's, and
Yes.
everyone else, it's never we read about them, but it's always the whole book is her point of view.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. It's very interesting how writers do that, and
Yeah.
I admire fiction writers that juggle characters and have to make that decision. Because you think about it, it's like Diana, she's like on book 9 or 10. I don't
Oh,
even know
yeah.
where she's at.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you just think she made a decision on day 1 that this would always be this particular person's, point of view through an entire series. And the books are this thick. I don't know if that's true with Game of Thrones. I've never read Game of Thrones, and I don't know if it's a Jon Snow. I don't know whose point of view that is. So now I'm gonna have to Google that afterwards. But it's very interesting. And I think that's a part of, if you like a good book,
Yeah.
books are stories. That to me, yes. And when I read a book, I often say, I can already see this as a movie.
Yeah, but Outlander, honestly, she had that commissioned several times before it actually ever got made. And so I've followed her because she's one of those writers who'll actually talk about her writing process. So
Yes.
she's actually interesting because she used to be on like AOL. And there was a writers forum on AOL, and so she would actually always write there as well. So she writes her books, but she always writes in all kinds of different capacities as well too. And so it's fascinating to understand her approach. And so her story of actually writing Outlander is just as interesting as Outlander itself. And
It's
so
true.
that's, if you're looking for a storyteller, she personally is one of the ultimate storytellers. And she's a scientist. She comes from a scientific background. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Wow, that's kinda interesting, and I'll throw another little piece of trivia. I used to live in Arizona,
yep,
and I used to live in Phoenix, and she also lives in Arizona. She lives
yeah,
in
yeah, yeah,
Phoenix, Scottsdale
yeah,
area,
yeah.
and she actually goes out when she publishes a new book. There's a
Poison pen.
Poison Pen,
Have
which
you
is a
been to the
bookstore.
Poison pen?
Yes,
Did you really? Oh my
it's
God, I'm jealous.
I've been there. It's a fabulous bookstore in
Yeah,
Scottsdale, and
yeah,
she still continues to
yeah,
release her books there. She meets people. So this is again about showing up. Part
yeah.
of her whole story is not just her books, who she is as a person. She shares, like she has, I think in Facebook or even on her website, she
Mhm.
shares snippets of her
Yes.
next book. So she's got her whole community of people. She's not removed. She's in the center of her network, which it's amazing that you can have that kind of story that, just you're right.
Yeah,
You could do a whole story of the storyteller,
yeah, exactly.
so to
But
speak.
honestly, to tie things into, because I did a podcast recently with Janus Oasis about community.
We always
Diana,
have to talk about John.
honestly,
John's
I
the
know, yeah.
epicenter of our
I,
LinkedIn lives here. We love John, and he's cooking.
but before there was John, there was Diana Gabaldon because she creates a community around her storytelling. And so, if you actually look at the way that she facilitates and works with the like the fans that she's got around the world, she's got one of the most respectful communities.
Mm.
But it's interesting to see how it's changed since the TV series started because
Ah,
like Sam Heughan is the character or like the actor who plays Jamie Fraser. He's been the target of a lot of abuse, and she's
oh,
really had to stand up for him because
wow.
people imagine Jamie Fraser to be one way, and he's either your Jamie Fraser or he's not your Jamie Fraser, and so he's been, yeah, he's been there's been a lot of vitriol hurled at him over
Wow.
the years, and the way that she's stood up for him and protected him, and just she's honestly like I respect her so immensely. So
Wow. Wow. Cool. Cool. Thanks, Jeff. That was a great question. That was a great question. Catherine says, love Nola's point about assessing the agenda of the storyteller. Good. Great point. Well made. So true. So true.
yeah.
Got to all the way through, all the way through. Nola, apart from the Talk Like Ted books, what are your favorite books on storytelling? Excellent, Niraj. That's an excellent question.
I actually, and this is obscure. I don't know if you are familiar. And again, I come to this from a lot of like romance books. I was raised by a woman who loves soap operas, right? So my mom used to watch or read Phyllis Whitney books. So if you're familiar with like Mary Clark, that sort of thing, Mary
Okay.
Stewart, yeah, that side of genre. And so I actually picked up a book that she had written actually about her process on how to write. And what I found so interesting was she actually used to keep a weather journal. Every
Oh.
day she would write down the weather and how she felt. And she kept it for
Ooh.
years and years and years. And so she would be able to go back and create scenes just because she remembered how she felt on one particular day. And then she could find it in the journal and describe the weather and how it played into the moods. And that's what makes her writing so vivid and
Wow.
emotional. And so
Wow.
that's, as I said, it's obscure, but I loved it.
That's good, that's good, and to sort of follow up on Niraj's, question here, if anybody, especially Catherine Ledger, because you're just a fabulous resource and she loves to read. If anybody recommends any good storytelling books, please pop them in the comments because I
Yep.
love crowdsourcing these comments because I think that really adds to things, so that's wonderful, that's wonderful. We have, "Hey, hey, hey, Sarah Clay.
Hey,
Hi,
Sarah.
ladies, sorry to be late." Great point about being relatable, Nola.
Yeah.
That is so true. Just
Yeah.
you, yeah, just and Sarah does a good job with that on all her points, all her posts. You just really get to know Sarah in all her funness and engagement. I just love that. I share snippets of my
Yep.
personal story, but mainly the headlines. That's good. That's good, and sometimes it's like the headlines, they can polarize you, like there's like a lot of stuff going on in the news today in the United States, and there's like lots of stuff
Mm,
going on with, what's going on in the world, what's going on in the United States, what's
yep.
going on politicals and stuff like that. So talking about the headlines is definitely a way. It's hard though because if you end up putting your opinions in there, it's out there. It's out there. And that's always the trade-off when you start talking about the headlines. What do you think about that, Nola?
So I think he's talking about the headlines of his personal story. I could be wrong.
Oh, I see, I see. I'm thinking
maybe,
of the I'm
maybe,
thinking okay,
yeah,
headlines, I'm thinking of news, but you're probably right. So, what would
yeah.
you say about his
So
comment then?
for one, I think that you should always do things that you're comfortable with because if you're going to be sharing things that are going to make you uncomfortable, you're not going to come across right. Right. So you don't want to put yourself out there. I mean, there's a purpose to putting yourself out there, but you don't want to do anything that's going to jeopardize your mental health. Um, people don't you don't owe anybody anything. You don't owe anybody your personal story. It's yours. You get to control it. And that's the thing with employee advocacy. Like employers are always looking for employees to share because it benefits the brand, it benefits the employee. But it's your story. It's your LinkedIn, it's your social media. You own it, right? So you have to choose how you use it and how that makes you comfortable. I do think you're right about Jillian about the headlines. I think that you have to be cautious about how it's going to serve you by
Right.
making those opinions public, right? You
Yep.
saw that with everything that's been happening in the Ukraine, right? So there are people who started off and that's all they were talking about, and it's good for them to have an opinion, and it's important for humanity and human rights and all of that stuff. But the thing is, once they kept writing about it, how many people tuned out? And it's not that it's not important stuff. It's just, do you want to see that every single time you read something from that person? So I think you
Right.
have to be cautious.
I agree, and especially too with your comments, and I
Yeah.
think people think, "Oh, I post one way, but I comment a different way," and, again, there's a mismatch
Yeah.
there, so it's like if you're talking, you're posting about one thing, but you're talking about everybody should be happy and kind and peaceful and, this and this and then they're doing sniping comments. There's a mismatch there. So
Yeah.
we have to remember, and I always tell people, especially if you think about, well, you know what? It really doesn't matter who's reading your comments, whether it's a colleague, your employer, prospective client. People are seeing your activity and they're seeing your comments, because you just go to somebody's profile and look
Mhm.
at their activity, you see their comments. So it's not like it's just getting buried. Oh, it's she was sniping on Nola's, Nola's post. Nobody will ever know. Yes, they will. They'll go to Jillian's profile and they'll see,
Yep.
look at her sniping away. What's up with that?
Yep.
So I think we have to, again, always be holistic about how we're showing up every bit of the way. So
Yeah, and people.
sorry about missing that headline thing.
No, that's okay. No big deal. People are going to make a decision, right? They're going to decide who you really are based on which version they believe is more credible,
That's
right?
true.
And that's
That's
where the
true.
danger is if you're telling a different story between your content and your comments.
Exactly. Exactly. So we've hit the 30-minute mark.
Oh,
And
already?
what I know, it's a Zoom. It just goes by so fast. So Nola, what words of wisdom would you like to leave us with today?
Think about what it is you want to convey and create a plan with that it's almost like breadcrumbs. You're creating like a story that's going to keep people's interest going, right? So it's not just the post that you write today, it's how does that post fit into your overall intention for what you want to convey with your social media. So, if you want to be analytical, it's story structure and content planning, but it's overall really just what do you want people to know? Like over
Mhm.
time, what do they want to say about you? How do you come across?
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, thank you very much for being a guest today on the show. And we'll continue the conversation in the comments, guys. And please join me again next week for another LinkedIn Live with Jillian. And I have another fabulous guest lined up. So talk with you soon. And thanks for coming in today. Okay.
Yay.
Bye.